Buckle up, me hearties. Your captain needs to do a little course correction. Did I really say I was looking forward to reviewing this episode because it had nothing to do with the series long arc? Well, I take it back. This episode does tease the series long arc, but not in a significant way, and overall this episode's ghastly, and not in a spooky way either. To its credit, at least they didn't skimp out on the budget. They firstly went out to the US of A for the first 2 episodes, and no joke, they filmed the upper deck sequences of this episode on a ship docked in Cornwall. Aside from how blindingly overlit those segments are, the episode is rather aesthetically pleasing when it comes to props, set design, and costumes. Even the idea of pirates in Doctor Who sounds wonderful with modern technology and the success of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Of course, there's also the story to contend with, written by Stephen Thompson. His repertoire of screenplays includes Sherlock's The Blind Banker, which I reviewed last month, and you should totally check it out if you haven't done so already. This video will be picking apart one of the show's more forgettable and critically mixed episodes in the revival. So, let's devour its juicy innards, shall we? We'll begin today's review with the prequel to this episode. I'm not really sure what the point of it is, aside from contextualizing the story and essentially acting as a second next time trailer for the episode. It's actually not a bad setup, to be honest. The narration is fairly ominous, and aside from the recycled footage from the actual episode, it kinda implies that the captain of the ship is the only one left if we're going purely by the visuals. It's a shame this couldn't have been tacked on to the beginning of the episode itself, because without it, the start is kinda pooey. Let's just address the titular issue, that of the black spot itself. Stemming from Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, it's fairly obvious what such a spot would mean. I just found it to be rather unnecessary, seeing as cuts or blood or burns were the primary identifier of a man marked for death. But come on, guys, we've got to make it as piratey as possible.
This episode's pretty piratey.
If you're going to do pirates and Doctor Who, you've got to do the whole thing.
No parrot.
So it turns out that the captain being alone on the ship in the prequel was just because his crew were all out on a rowing boat, presumably scouting the surroundings. Note how I'm attempting to fill the gaps in the story here. How long it's been since they've last seen land, or where exactly they were sailing to, is never made apparent either. The trio make themselves known in typically awkward and cringy fashion and are then sentenced to being shark bait.
Shark bait! Ooh-ha-ha!
Amy was then conveniently thrown below deck, where they kept all the swords. I did quite like how all the pirates suddenly became so fearful of her wielding a sword, seeing as it fitted in with the story. Seeing them all waving broom handles and ropes created quite an amusing short-lived moment.
What kind of rubbish pirates are you?
With Rory and a disposable pirate marked for death, the former actually had a hilarious little moment whilst under the influence of the siren, becoming a rowdy drunk bloke for about 30 seconds. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end, and when the siren actually showed up, I couldn't help but laugh. The singing is really annoying, the CGI is terrible, and the way the crew acted as though they'd never seen the thing pop crew members out of existence before just made me lose faith in the scenario entirely.
I have to touch her, let me touch. Sorry, but he is spoken for.
Oh dearie dearie me. They all head to the lower decks, and before we have the chance to breathe again, one of the pirates gets bitten by a leech. Once again, nobody seemed to make an effort to prevent this disposable pirate from vanishing, even though they all knew full well what was going to happen to him. The rest escaped to another room where they found the captain's son hiding in a barrel. This moment was so totally bewildering to me, given that the crew had been stuck there with no wind for 8 days and weren't able to account for small portions of their food and water vanishing. Oh, sorry, am I filling in the blanks again?
Typhoid fever. Piss off.
I don't believe that for 1 second. The kid then spilled out a boatload of exposition about his father, as though his time spent inside the barrel just didn't affect him at all. Little Billy Boy then decided to open a barrel full of water for some reason, and miraculously the siren didn't shoot out of it like every other time beforehand. I think it's a real shame as well that Captain Avery was generally perceived as good by the Doctor after the siren showed up, just because he perceived himself as the captain of his own spaceship, and
I think the Doctor particularly sort of loves loves the idea of being a pirate, you know?
That somehow warranted this bloodthirsty villain to board the TARDIS? I think what I was yearning for primarily was this captain to act in a crueler fashion. He's just too nice. Apparently Henry Avery was indeed a real pirate, and I think the episode assumes too much about the audience's knowledge of him. Admittedly, I thought it was great when his reputation for thievery and violence was thrown in his son's face, but unfortunately the child acting really tainted this scene.
He's your captain, a naval officer. You're honour bound to do as he tells you.
We sail under the black flag, the Jolly Roger.
Liar! You liar! You're going to remain at your post.
It was super strange as well how Amy was just cuddling him despite the kid coughing and spluttering from a disease she was only faintly aware of. This scene in the TARDIS was so pointless as well, horribly intercut throughout the mutiny scene. Seriously, they might as well have had the TARDIS eject the trio from the start. Suddenly it's not the water the siren springs from, but just any old reflection. We finally got to see the Doctor address the imperfect nature of his new best bud.
Help me like this lot out.
Where are we taking it?
The ocean.
No, this is the treasure of the Mogul of India.
Oh, good. For a moment there, I thought it was yours.
And this character's avarice would eventually lead to his downfall, which I thought was pretty good. Unfortunately, this led to the captains unanimously agreeing to just wait until the wind picks up, grinding the episode's pacing to a halt where Amy and Rory just went to sleep on the floor. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Captain Hook just looked up at the stars.
Travelled far like you. Space can be very lonely.
Sorry, but when did you break it to this man that you could travel in space? Obviously, the captain just takes this as gospel and doesn't question what would probably, to a 17th century pirate, be the ravings of a madman. This was when the second character in the space of 2 minutes asks Henry why he turned pirate, when, to me, it was blatantly bloody obvious.
Now I ain't saying she a gold digger.
Anyway, the plot had to get moving at some point, so a storm spontaneously whipped up. Rory got knocked over the edge for being an absolute clown, and the Doctor decides the best course of action is to let the sirens take them. It was a shame there wasn't much evidence to suggest that the siren wasn't in fact disintegrating them, aside from the fact there was something ailing them all, like a disease, cut or burn.
There are worse ways than having your face knocked off by a dodgy mermaid.
But look at it this way. There's a stroppy, homicidal mermaid trying to kill all.
How much worse can things get?
Yeah.
It truly felt like a bit of a gamble without much favour, but whatever gets our characters to the big reveal that, the sirens from space. Great. Now all I can think of is that episode of Red Dwarf where Craig Charles snogged that giant bug thing. Visually, this spaceship can seem very breathtaking. Somebody obviously took the time to make these amazing alien skulls and outfits and design the sets and all, but just throwing aliens in here for the sake of it doesn't really help the story whatsoever.
There are lots of different universes nested inside each other. Now and again they collide and you can step from one to the other.
I'm confused.
Yeah, well, it's a big club. We should get t-shirts.
Why was it that these three were allowed to walk around whilst all the others who got zapped are lying in beds? Why was the TARDIS teleported here? Did it have typhoid fever too? Suddenly the siren showed up with the captain trying to shoot her, as though he'd never thought to try doing this when members of his crew turned to smoke previously? Christ, whenever she turned red, I just howled with laughter. The Doctor then explained that she'd just been taking care of them as a virtual doctor. The basic essence is that Rory can't leave the sickbay without being returned to his drowning state. Considering the countless times this character has died in the show, it's honestly just a joke to me that they would even ramp up the dramatic music as though his death would actually be a reality.
I'm a nurse.
What?
I'm a nurse.
God, he really likes to remind us of his only character trait, doesn't he? All the unnecessary tears as well just didn't sway me emotionally whatsoever. Seriously, if Rory dying wasn't such a meme at this point, this might not have been a bad moment dramatically, but Jesus Christ, this segment was so tediously pointless. The episode ended in that typical cliche way where one of the side characters flies off into space where adventure awaits. It's rather sickening to think how frequently random episodes end like this. This one just takes the cake for me though, as all the captain's crewmates just stood behind him looking as excited as his kid. The mutineers as well are just fine with being there, not to mention the fact that none of the other missing crewmates wind up being here either. Finally, we're no closer to finding out Amy's pregnancy sitch, and...
Good night, Doctor.
Good night, Amelia.
They're going to bed again! Time traveling must truly be hard work. So, did it suck? I think the answer was clear from the beginning of this review. The start of the episode isn't too horrendous though, and pirates in Doctor Who probably could have worked with a decent script. The humour is very hit and miss, and some of the design work is interesting to say the least. The biggest problem, of course, is the intelligent siren that pops up in the most hilarious ways, with a child actor who can't save the story either. It's just such a forgettable, unimportant story that leaves a lot to be desired. I give The Curse of the Black Spot a 3 out of 10. With Rory and a disposable pirate marked for death, the former actually had a hilarious little moment whilst under the influence of the silence. No, oh my god, not the silence, it's the siren. The singing is really annoying, the CGI, oh, hello, ding ding. The perfect musical taste buds.